Before sunrise, when the school sat empty and the playground looked more like a shadowy field of shapes than a place for children, a bobcat began appearing near the slide at Red Hollow Elementary. At first, it looked like a wildlife problem and nothing more. A predator too close to a school, a dangerous sign in the half-light before buses and students arrived. But when the animal returned again and again to the same patch of playground, pacing near the slide supports and refusing to leave even when the custodian shouted and clapped to scare it off, one man stopped treating it like a random encounter. He started paying attention to what it was doing. What he found under the slide that morning turned a routine opening shift into an emergency, and left an entire town talking about the wild cat that showed up before dawn and would not go away. This is a story about routine, instinct, and the moment a school custodian trusted a pattern instead of dismissing it. Before we start, hit the like button, subscribe if you enjoy long, emotional mystery rescue animal stories, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Walter Briggs had opened Red Hollow Elementary nearly every weekday for 11 years, and he did it with the kind of quiet discipline nobody noticed unless he was absent. He was 62, broad-backed, careful with his knees, and the sort of man who carried 3 flashlights because he didn't trust batteries, weather forecasts, or people who said they'd get to it later. He arrived at 4:55 a.m. year-round, no matter if it was August heat or January sleet, unlocked the maintenance door on the east side, turned on corridor lights wing by wing, checked boiler temps in winter, reset any tripped breakers, and walked the grounds before staff started arriving. By 6:15, the cafeteria ladies would come in. By 6:40, the first teachers. By 7:10, the buses. Walter liked the hour before all of that. The stillness, the hum of heaters, the smell of floor wax and pencil shavings, the feeling that for a little while the whole building was held together by keys, switches, and his footsteps. Red Hollow sat at the edge of town where the subdivision gave way to scrub pines, a drainage creek, and a patchwork of undeveloped lots. Deer crossed the football field some mornings. Raccoons raided the dumpster if the lid wasn't latched. Once a fox had denned beyond the baseball backstop, and the kindergartners became impossible to control at recess for a week. Walter knew wildlife came close sometimes, but he had never seen a bobcat on school grounds. The first morning it appeared, he was halfway through his exterior check with a push broom over one shoulder and a ring of keys hanging from his belt, heading toward the playground to inspect a section of fence the principal had asked about. The sky was still dark enough that the swing set looked like black ribs against the security lights. As he approached the play area, something moved near the slide tower. Walter stopped dead. At first he thought medium dog. Then it turned sideways in the lamp glow, and he saw the short tail, the tufted ears, the spotted coat. "Bobcat," he whispered, more surprised than afraid. The animal stood beside the big spiral slide for a few seconds, tense and low, then paced around to the straight slide on the toddler side. Walter set the broom down and clapped sharply. "Hey, get!" Most wild animals bolted when he raised his voice. This one flinched, backed 3 steps, and then came right back toward the same section of mulch beneath the slide platform. It circled once, looked at the ground, then at Walter, then at the ground again. Walter grabbed the flashlight from his jacket pocket and swept the beam toward the structure. The bobcat slipped behind the climbing panels and vanished into the dark beyond the fence before he could get closer. He waited, listening. Wind in the chain link, a distant truck on the highway, the metallic tick of the flagpole line. Nothing else. He walked over to the slide and checked quickly for obvious damage, trash, or an animal den. The mulch was churned in one spot, but playground mulch got kicked around all the time. He shined the light under the platform and saw only support posts, shadows, and a forgotten blue kickball half buried near the border timber. No sounds, no movement. He told himself it had probably been hunting mice and got spooked when he arrived. At 6:30, while replacing a cracked exit sign bulb in the south hallway, he mentioned the sighting to Principal Dana Mercer. Dana was in her 40s, efficient, and permanently 3 tasks ahead of everyone else by 7 in the morning. She looked up from a stack of attendance reports and said, "A bobcat? On the playground?" Walter nodded. "Slipped off when I yelled." Dana frowned. "Call animal control if it comes back. We can't have wildlife near the kids." Walter agreed. That should have been the end of it. The second morning, the bobcat was back. This time Walter saw it before he reached the play area. It was sitting under the monkey bars, body angled toward the slide, as if waiting. Frost silvered the mulch, and the first hint of dawn sat low behind the pines. Walter felt a prickling across his shoulders that had nothing to do with the cold. He clicked on the flashlight and raised his voice. "Move along!" The bobcat rose, limped 2 steps. Walter noticed the hitch immediately in one hind leg, and trotted to the slide again. Not away from it. To it. It went straight to the same spot beneath the toddler slide, lowered its head, pawed once at the mulch, then turned and looked at Walter. Ears forward. Tense. Not aggressive. Expectant, almost. Walter stood there holding the flashlight and broom, his practical mind dividing into arguments. Predator near a school. Call it in. Stay back. Animal behavior repeating at exact location. Check the location. He advanced slowly, sweeping the beam low. "Get out of here," he said again, less forcefully this time. The bobcat gave a rough, rasping cry, more like a cough than a meow, and backed off 10 feet. It did not run. It paced in a short arc near the climbing wall, watching him. Walter crouched near the slide supports and shined the light beneath the platform. Mulch. The buried kickball. A lunchbox lid, maybe. One red mitten. He frowned. The mitten was odd. Lost clothing happened, but not usually under the toddler slide in January when recess had been indoors all week due to cold. Then he heard a faint sound. He froze. At first he thought wind vibrating the plastic slide tunnel. Then it came again. Thin, muffled, and uneven. A whimper. Walter rose so fast his knees cracked. He backed away from the structure and called Dana from his cell with fingers that suddenly felt clumsy. "Principal Mercer, I need you outside now by the playground, and call 911. She started asking questions. Walter cut her off, voice harder than he'd used in years. "Now!" By the time Dana arrived in her coat over pajama scrubs, she lived 6 minutes away and had clearly driven fast. Walter had already called the dispatcher himself and was kneeling by the slide, listening with one ear almost against the plastic side panel. The bobcat was still there, farther off now near the fence line, tail twitching. Dana came through the gate breathless. "What is it? What did you find?" Walter pointed under the slide, face pale in the flashlight glow. "Something's under there. I think it's a child." Dana went white. Red Hollow Elementary had a small after-school program and a winter community night the previous evening. Families in and out for a literacy fair, hot chocolate in the cafeteria, book swap in the library, student art on display in the gym. The building had been busy until almost 8. Staff had done sweep checks. Teachers had packed up. Parents had signed kids out. At least, that was the assumption all night. Walter dropped to the mulch and used the flashlight to look through the gap between the slide skirt and support framing. The whimper came again, and this time he saw movement deep under the platform beyond a plastic crawl panel and a tangle of netting supports. A small shoe, then a child's sleeve. "Hey!" Walter called, fighting to keep his voice calm. "Hey, sweetheart, can you hear me? You're okay. We're here." A weak cry answered from the dark. Dana clapped a hand over her mouth. "Oh my God!" Walter was already moving. "Don't touch the structure. We need rescue to assess. If a kid is wedged in there and we shift something—" He didn't finish. Dana snapped into administrator mode, dialing dispatch again to update them, and then the district emergency line, voice shaking but controlled. She confirmed the gates were locked, so no one would wander in before police arrived, and she radioed the kitchen staff parking lot entrance to stay clear and wait inside their cars. The bobcat paced along the inside of the fence near the pine line, making that rasping cry again every 30 seconds or so. It seemed agitated by the adult's movement, but still did not leave. Dana stared at it once between calls and said, almost to herself, "It was trying to show you." Walter didn't answer, because he was listening for the child. He got closer and tried again. "What's your name, honey?" A pause, a shaky whisper too faint to catch. "What was that?" "Mia." Walter shut his eyes for half a second in relief that she was responsive. "Mia, I'm Walter. I work here. Help is coming. Can you tell me if you're hurt?" Crying. Then, stuck. Later they would piece it together from security footage, teacher statements, and Mia's own fragmented memory. Mia Torres, 6 years old, had attended the literacy fair with her older brother and mother. During cleanup, while adults were stacking folding tables and kids were saying goodbye, Mia slipped away to the playground side exit with another child, then doubled back alone after dropping one mitten near the slide. The exterior gate had not latched fully in the wind after a volunteer carried boxes through it. Mia crawled under the toddler slide skirt to retrieve a dropped bracelet charm, wriggled deeper past a support bracket, and became wedged between the underside paneling and a compacted area of frozen mulch when her puffy coat bunched and one boot snagged in netting hardware. She cried, then cried less, then fell asleep in the cold dark and woke disoriented before dawn. And a bobcat found her before anyone else did. Sirens reached the school in less than 8 minutes, but felt like half an hour. Red Hollow Police, County EMS, and the volunteer fire rescue truck rolled in with lights flashing across the empty pickup lane. Officer Trent Vale was first through the gate, hand on his belt, expecting a break-in or overdose, until Dana pointed to the slide, and he heard the child crying under it. Fire Captain Eliza Shaw arrived seconds later, took one look, and switched the scene into rescue mode with the clipped focus of someone who had done complicated extractions in much worse places. "No one moves the structure until I see anchor points," she said, dropping to one knee beside Walter. "How long has she been there?" Walter swallowed. "Unknown. We found her maybe 5 minutes ago. Event here last night." Captain Shaw grimaced. "Okay. Hypothermia risk, entrapment risk. We go slow, we go smart." Mia's mother, Rosa Torres, arrived before the rescue was even fully set up, because Dana had called her directly once Officer Vale identified the likely child from a missing mitten report and the district family roster. Rosa came running across the lot in slippers and a coat thrown over scrubs, her husband right behind her, both of them wild with fear. Officer Vale stopped them at the tape line while Captain Shaw crouched near the slide and spoke in the steady, gentle tone rescuers use to bring panic down by degrees. "Mia, my name is Eliza. We're going to get you out, okay? I need you to keep talking to us if you can." A soft cry. Walter stayed on the ground beside the captain, flashlight angled where she directed. "There," he said, pointing at a bracket under the side panel. "That edge catches, and her coat's hung up maybe on that bolt." Shaw nodded. "Good eyes." The bobcat remained at the far side of the playground near the fence, half in shadow now as dawn light grew stronger. One of the firefighters noticed it and muttered, "You seeing this?" Another nodded, stunned. "It's still here." Officer Vale started to move toward it to clear the scene, but Shaw stopped him with a quick look. "If it's not advancing, leave it. I need hands here." The extraction took 22 minutes. It felt endless. Firefighters stabilized the slide platform to prevent shifting, then removed an access panel on the side, rather than trying to yank Mia backward through the narrow gap. One medic lay flat in the mulch, reaching in to keep Mia calm and monitor breathing, while another prepared heat blankets and a pediatric kit. Walter never left his spot. He talked to Mia when she whimpered, asked about her favorite crayons, asked if she liked the library fish tank, told her Mrs. Hensley in kindergarten would be very upset if Mia missed snack. Mia answered in tiny drifting words that broke everyone's heart. At one point she started crying for her mother, and Rosa made a sound behind the tape that nearly undid the whole line of adults holding themselves together. Dana took Rosa's shoulders and said, "She hears you. They're getting her. They're getting her." When the side panel finally came free and Captain Shaw guided Mia's coat loose from the bracket, the little girl slid into the medic's arms covered in mulch, cold as ice, eyes half-lidded but conscious. Every adult in the playground seemed to exhale at once. Rosa was allowed through then, and she dropped to her knees in the frost, while medics wrapped Mia in heat blankets and checked her vitals. Walter turned away for a moment, suddenly shaking. He looked toward the fence line. The bobcat was standing still, watching. For one clear second in the gray dawn, he saw it fully. Lean body, tufted ears, winter coat rough at the shoulder, a slight hitch in one hind leg when it shifted. It looked from the cluster around Mia to Walter, then back toward the tree line beyond the school. No panic, no drama, just one last look. Then it slipped through a low gap under the fence and vanished into the pines. No one saw it again. Mia was transported to County Hospital for hypothermia evaluation, dehydration, and minor bruising. Miraculously, she had no fractures and no internal injuries, just a badly chilled body and some scrapes where the hardware and frozen mulch had pressed into her coat and skin. Doctors told Rosa and Luis that if she had remained outside much longer, especially with the overnight temperatures dipping below freezing, the outcome could have been much worse. The words landed hard in a town where people like to believe bad things happened somewhere else. The school spent the next week in a storm of investigations, policy reviews, and tearful gratitude. District officials checked gate latches, event sign-out procedures, final sweeps, exterior camera coverage, and volunteer access points. Dana Mercer sat through meetings she barely remembered and signed more incident forms than she thought possible. But she also visited Mia at home with a stack of get-well cards made by first graders and cried in her car afterward for 10 straight minutes. Walter became the accidental center of the story and hated every second of the attention. Local reporters called him the custodian who rescued the child, and he corrected them every time. "Fire rescue got her out," he'd say. "I found her because the bobcat kept going back to the slide." Most people smiled politely at that part, as if humoring him, until Officer Vale and Captain Shaw both confirmed on record that the animal had been present before the rescue and had repeatedly returned to the same exact location on the playground. Wildlife officers later suggested several possibilities. The bobcat may have heard Mia crying in the dark and investigated. It may have been drawn by movement or scent under the slide. It may have been using the playground as a hunting corridor and become agitated by the trapped child's sounds. All of that was plausible. None of it explained, at least not neatly, why it stayed through shouted attempts to scare it off and returned to the same spot on consecutive mornings. Walter didn't spend much time worrying over explanations. He only knew what had happened in front of him. He saw a pattern. He checked it, and a child lived. The part that stayed with him most was not the sirens or the cameras, or even Rosa hugging him so hard his maintenance radio dug into his ribs. It was the first moment he heard Mia answer from under the slide after he called into the dark. He had opened that building thousands of times, swept that playground in every season, fixed bolts and mulch borders and clogged drains, and still there had been a child in danger under his nose until a wild animal refused to leave. Red Hollow changed after that. The district replaced every exterior playground latch, added dual close checks after events, and installed motion-triggered cameras covering the play structures. Dana created a written, nighttime ground sweep map with signatures instead of verbal confirmations. Captain Shaw came to staff in-service and taught a short session on entrapment awareness in playground equipment. Officer Vale, who had originally rolled his eyes at animal behavior stories, told the PTA that unusual repeated patterns on school grounds should always be investigated before dismissal. If something keeps showing up in the same place, he said, you check the place. As for Walter, he added one habit to his morning routine. Before unlocking the East Hall, before checking boilers, before sweeping the front walk, he stood for 10 seconds at the maintenance door and listened. Wind, wires, leaves, distant trucks, sometimes owls, sometimes nothing. It wasn't superstition. It was attention. Weeks later, after Mia was back in school and proudly showing classmates the tiny scar on her wrist, from the rescue slide, Walter saw the bobcat one last time. It was just before dawn again, cold and quiet, with frost on the blacktop and the playground empty under the lamps. Walter was near the dumpster enclosure when movement beyond the fence caught his eye. The bobcat stood in the edge of the pines, half hidden, watching the school. It looked healthier, though the hind legs still carried that slight hitch. Walter didn't clap or shout. He just stood there with his flashlight lowered. "Well," he said softly into the dark, feeling a little foolish and not caring. "We got her." The bobcat blinked once, turned, and disappeared between the trees. People in Red Hollow still tell the story in different ways. Some say the bobcat saved Mia Torres. Some say Walter Briggs did. Some insist the whole thing was coincidence, that a wild cat just happened to be curious in the same place a child happened to be trapped. Walter has heard all the versions and doesn't argue much anymore. If someone asks him what he thinks, he shrugs in that slow way of his and says the same thing every time. I think the cat kept pointing at something, and I finally looked where it was pointing. And on winter mornings, when the school is still dark and the playground sits silent under the security lights, Walter still sweeps his beam once beneath the slide before the buses roll in. Not because he expects another miracle, but because he learned the hardest and most useful lesson a custodian can learn. Routine keeps a building open, but noticing is what keeps people safe.